The asbestos industry is able to thrive in Russia because very little attention is given to human rights or civil rights. Putin really basically runs the show. One might ask, what is the future of asbestos production and use? As long as there's profit to be made and officials to be bribed, this will continue. But if you can't control asbestos, the most notorious industrial carcinogen known, what can you control?
Asbestos is a remarkable mineral. Actually stone, it is made up of tiny but extremely strong and flexible fibers. It was absolutely fire safe, and water couldn't harm it. We suggest you consider this material for your home. Designed to last a lifetime, a trouble-free lifetime.
Asbestos was once widely used in homes and buildings across the US, but is now known as a carcinogen and hazardous substance because of the dangerous health risks from exposure to this toxic mineral. Enormous effort is put into removing it from houses and materials, because asbestos kills more than 100,000 people a year and is banned in 59 countries. But rather than being left in the ground, countries like Russia, one of the world's largest producer of asbestos, mines about 1 million tons of it a year and supplies more than half the world's asbestos. To find out why anyone would still work with and sell such a dangerous substance, we went to the home of the world's largest asbestos mine, in a place so proud of their industry, they named the town after it, Asbest, Russia. Despite overwhelming scientific evidence that asbestos exposure causes cancer, as we drove through the town, all we saw were signs of local pride and a monument literally made out of a chunk of asbestos.
Wow. This pit is huge and it's full of asbestos. They mine 500,000 tons of it here every year.
Asbestos is often mined by using dynamite. Unfortunately, that means the deadly fibers are spread into the air, which made me terrified of standing close to the pit without full protective gear. But when I turned up wearing what's legally required in the US and Europe, I felt like an alien and really stood out from the locals.
I mean, here I am in full-blown protective gear, and these guys are just strolling around like it's nothing. Are you not worried about the dust and the asbestos fibers coming out of the mine?
А зачем бояться? Когда боишься, тогда все и происходит. А если не бояться, то организм и так справляется. Все, погнали. Ну, всего доброго.
As it turns out, the Ural Asbest mine is a local tourist attraction. And if sightseers want to learn more, they can visit a museum in town dedicated to it.
А вот этот зал – это постоянная экспозиция, рассказывающая об истории города Асбеста. Вот дата 1720 год. Первое месторождение асбеста было открыто там крестьянином Сафрон Сагра. Из этой кудели, это уже легенда, он принес домой вот эти камни, и жена из этой кудели каменной сделала ему рукавицы. И когда однажды случайно эта рукавица попадает в костер, оказалось, что она не сгорела. Вот так и узнали о том, что асбест – это минерал, который не горит.
Asbestos mining boomed during the Soviet era.
Ну, это был 1918 год. Просто все прииски были национализированы, как бы государством были, под эгиду государства переданы.
This formerly agrarian region became one of the hundreds of Soviet monotowns, whose entire economy was built around a single mine or factory. To this day, the Ural Asbest mine provides 70% of the town's income, which means that banning it would be economically devastating.
Но, тем не менее, производство работает, все заинтересованы в том, чтобы асбест жил, работал.
We visited the home of a local man who worked as an excavator driver in the asbestos mine. He had lived his whole life in Asbest, just a few minutes' walk from the open pit. Because of the impact, impact this interview could have on his job and his family, we had to conceal his identity.
Does everything in Asbest revolve around the asbestos industry?
Вот если, допустим, комбината не будет, города не существует, считайте, что да, потому что это так и будет. Градообразующее предприятие у нас комбинат получается так. Если его не будет, это просто, да, точно города не будет уже сразу. Можно переезжать.
Are you worried about any hazards that come with working with asbestos?
Да не особо, я скажу, потому что как бы если привык контактов, да, если вы боитесь, да, как бы вот я вот, допустим, не боюсь, могу асбест как бы в руку взять, как бы ничего страшного от этого не будет же, просто потом помыл руки и все, никаких проблем, да. Вот. Да не настолько он вреден, как говорят.
After this Ural Asbest employee surprisingly conveyed that he was not fearful to handle asbestos, we met a retired mine worker who had a more skeptical outlook on the situation.
А то, что болеют люди. Взрывы, туда все, и пыль. На окнах везде пыль. Это же асбест. И в любом, и химикаты также. Мы просто не видим. И любое предприятие, да любая работа, она вредная для здоровья человека. Вот. Ну, не помирать же. Живем, уже адаптированные люди к этим вопросам, я думаю. И на любом предприятии. Но только это, чтобы точные цифры узнать, вам не дадут никто. Любое предприятие – это часть мундира.
We wanted to find out more about the health risks of asbestos exposure. We spoke to an expert on the subject, the esteemed epidemiologist, Dr. Arthur Frank.
The term asbestos refers to 6 naturally occurring minerals, chrysotile being one of them. It is the only serpentine form. The other 5 are called amphiboles. They're structurally different, but medically have the same properties. Asbestos at one time was called the magic mineral because it was utilized for many useful things. Insulation materials, it didn't conduct electricity, it was used as a filtering agent. Over 3,000 to 4,000 products alone in the United States at one time had asbestos. It was a wonderful material. Unfortunately, it also killed people. What happens when you're exposed is you both inhale it and you ingest it. The asbestos has the ability to alter the nucleus of the cells so that the cells now become cancerous. Either you get a lung cancer or the disease we call mesothelioma, this cancer of the lining of the lung that fills the lung with fluid in most cases, and then over time literally suffocates you and will ultimately kill you. In the United States, it has had a devastating effect on those people exposed. Essentially, everyone in the construction trades was exposed, shipyard workers were exposed, and many others have been exposed over time.
The effects of asbestos exposure in the United States is evident in mining towns like Libby, Montana. Water, soil, homes, school playgrounds, and industrial sites in Libby were contaminated with asbestos as a result of a nearby vermiculite mine and processing operation owned by W.R. Grace and Company. Normally safe and used in many products, the vermiculite in a mine was heavily contaminated with asbestos, and as a result, over 400 people have died in Libby due to exposure to asbestos or from asbestos-related diseases.
She comes down here in her cart, leaves it right here, gets out, goes to the bathroom. She can't even brush her teeth. She runs out of hair. And she has to come out here and stand here and get her breath before she can even sit down, because it makes it worse when she sits down for a couple of seconds. It's terrible. She's got a special bed she has to have.
Don MUNSEL never worked in the mine himself, but his stepfather did. And the asbestos dust on the clothes he brought back from work was enough to give Don severe mesothelioma.
I just think I've been cheated. They should have warned the people in this town about the seriousness of it. They got away with murder. I didn't think I'd ever get it because I never worked there. But I did. I got to set up a little bit. All this talking even shortened my breath out real bad. Yeah, I've lived in this country all my life. I never thought this would happen to me.
These 5 tanks last 2 weeks. And now that she's up on 8, I don't even think it'll last 2 weeks. If it takes me over 60 seconds to do this, she passes out. She literally will pass out.
They knew it was bad for us, and they let us expose our babies. And people that would come and visit us, oh, the best way to show them how this stuff works is to pop it for them. So you get a little piece of paper, a little piece of the ore, vermiculite, and it would be no bigger than a slice of your paper, and you'd heat it up and it would go about this thick. It was amazing, but it was the worst thing we could have done to them.
I was a foreman and I had to go up a lot, and so she'd ride up there with me and my kids. We'd go and take them through the plant and show them how it ran and stuff. And
I miss being spontaneous. We loved to fish. So we'd go behind the screening plant. That was a good, easy fishing hole after dinner. The babies, I could set them down in that asbestos sand. They'd build sandcastles and they'd play and build all kinds of things in this asbestos while I just had fun fishing. As beautiful as this country is, it killed us. I know it's gonna kill me. And it's probably gonna kill my kids and husband. And it didn't really kill us, it was W.R. Grace that killed us. They knew. They knew.
In June 2009, the EPA declared a public health emergency in the town of Libby and surrounding communities. The area is now designated as a Superfund site, also known as a hazardous waste site, and the EPA investigation and cleanup of the site is ongoing. The asbestos in Libby is a different kind of asbestos than what's mined in Russia, but the scientific community has found that all types of asbestos can cause cancer and deadly lung diseases. To find out why this toxic industry continues to thrive around the developing world, we met with MIT professor and former chair of the National Advisory Committee on Occupational Safety and Health, Dr. Nicholas Ashford.
The asbestos industry today, I think you would have to say, is, a criminal industry. And all the epidemiological societies, 15 of them have endorsed the fact that this should be regarded as a hazard. And when you deliberately disregard public and worker health, you're committing murder. There's no other way to put it. You can argue that you don't know which particular worker you're murdering, but on the whole, the statistics are very, very clear.
With all the proof from the asbestos exposure in the US, we wondered if physicians and officials in Russia were aware of the risks posed to the workers of the Uralaspis asbestos mine and those living nearby. So we drove to the Oncology Center in nearby Yekaterinburg to meet Dr. Sergei Berzin, hoping he could tell us about the effects the mine in asbest was having on its citizens.
What are the most common types of cancer in this area?
Среди мужчин рак легкого, среди женщин рак молочной железы.
Do you have a lot of patients from asbest?
Ну, не сказать, что они чаще обращаются. Хотя надо сказать, что мне привелось там дважды работать на практике. И мне там, кстати, понравилось, в городе Асбесте. На мой взгляд, атмосфера там была вполне удовлетворяющая.
Not only did Dr. Berezin not fear the air in asbest, he seemed quite fond of the mineral itself, which completely contradicts what oncologists in the West would have to say about asbestos.
That's asbestos. And you can just touch it like that. It's not dangerous.
У меня на даче, которая уже существует более 30 лет, баня покрыта шифером. Это асбестовый материал.
Oh, such a strange interview.
As he wouldn't let us speak to his patients at the Yekaterinburg Oncology Center, we headed to the local hospital in Asbest to see if anyone there would speak out.
Our fixer is trying to talk to one of the patients now, but so far it's not going so well. Oh, she doesn't want anymore.
It was clear that no one was going to say anything bad about either asbestos, or more importantly, the company that mines it, Ural Asbest.
Ural Asbest owns this town. They sponsor the schools, the healthcare system, the football teams. Everyone's livelihood is depending on them.
It's understandable that people who rely on a single industry for their livelihood are not going to bite the hand that feeds them with negative remarks. So to find out where Russia really stands on the hazards of asbestos, we went to Moscow to speak to the head of the Russian Academy of Medical Sciences, Dr. Kovalevsky, who has been conducting research on workers in asbest on behalf of the World Health Organization.
The people in Asbest live right next to an open asbestos pit mine. Is this dangerous?
Life is dangerous. Сейчас я не могу это сказать. Очень трудно выделить роль именно асбеста. Потому что рядом там, потому что Свердловская область при всей своей развитости, там и серьезных экологических проблем хватает.
You have been studying the effects of asbestos exposure in asbest since 2009. What has your research found so far?
Это достаточно, как во всех эпидемиологических исследованиях, от начала до получения результатов проходят годы.
The problem, however, is not that the research will take years, but that the research itself has been called into question by a group of acclaimed scientists like Dr. Arthur Frank, who have petitioned the World Health Organization to end their relationship with Dr. Kovalevsky over ethical questions surrounding his ties to the Russian asbestos industry, a wealthy and powerful business that is alive and well in spite of well-documented health risks.
In Russia, they have stopped recording mesothelioma separately as a type of cancer and have lumped it in with other diseases so that you no longer can identify mesotheliomas. What we've learned in public health is the absence of data doesn't mean the absence of disease. This is the same tactic that the tobacco companies used in saying we don't know enough to say that tobacco is harmful. We certainly know enough about chrysotile asbestos to say that it is harmful. The fact that we've learned in the West that asbestos use can cause mesotheliomas and that we've had an epidemic that is continuing and will continue for a number of decades yet is nothing like what we're going to see in the developing world, like India and China. The Indians import a lot of Russian asbestos, and they will have the same epidemic of mesotheliomas and other asbestos-related cancers as we have had in the West, because they have not learned the lessons that we have, that asbestos is harmful and that it should not be used.